This is Juan, Mateo, and Andrew's presentation. We're all mathematics teachers, so we chose the journal which we use sometimes called the Mathematics Teacher, which is put out by the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics in the United States. So very American flavor to it with a dash of Canadian authorship in it, focusing on grade 8 to 12 teaching approaches in the classroom. They do have a rigorous review process, which we believe lends itself to the validity of the magazine and makes us comfortable with using it. The essential question we would like to ask people when they're reading our presentation and reading the journal is, how does the journal bridge the gap between academics and classroom teachers to improve mathematics education? Is this important? We believe it is, and the learning sciences is all evolving around that concept of bridging that. The National Council of Teachers of Mathematics focuses on the constructivist worldview, looking at the understandings and emerging theories and analysis that is coming out of the participants' view. When we look at the orientation of research orientation, we see that it's qualitative in approach, not much statistical analysis happening in the journal, which is kind of strange for a mathematical journal, but we have to remember we're looking at education, which is often very qualitative in research approach. And we're looking at the design of grounded theory and case study. I'm looking very specifically at processes and isolated strategies for particular concepts, but very focused on an individual process and trying to study that. So that's why we say case study, and very bounded by time often. The journal started in 1908, and starting in 1908, it doesn't have much data in it, and it continues in the 60s and 80s, looking much at the researchers' ideas, then looking at steps students should be following, but doesn't give examples about student work in them. In the 90s and into the 2000s, we see a growing practice of incorporating data from researchers, teachers, and students, and giving student examples which are so appreciated by teachers when they're reading the journals. The worldview, like we said, is constructivist throughout, looking at emerging approaches to teaching mathematics, but very heavily our data is observational and based on interviews in this journal. We see in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, as we stated, that you don't get a lot of student data, you don't get a lot of research backing up what the articles are about. It continues into the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where they're talking about what students should do, but we still see that's grounded theory and case study and design, looking at very particular events and studying them. We see case studies in the 2000s that are happening, that are looking at particular events or processes. But what we see now is we see in almost every article, we see some student work or research backing up what the author is saying, which is we think and we believe as a group that is increasing the validity of the magazine journal. Our focus article today is the lenses for examining students' mathematical thinking, and it models the evolution of the magazine, where we see the authorship is 2 teachers and 2 academics working together to write about a study they did together. So what they're looking at here is, we often say it's important to know how kids think. It's important to know how our students think. But how do we measure that? They studied a video club where teachers videotaped their classes, and they came together and tried to look at how students were interacting and thinking in the class. We see scripts as data, and that's what we see right here, a sample of a script. The results were that they saw that teachers were looking at the videos using 3 lenses. They were either taking an initial look, going deeper, or looking across. So there was 3 different ways that teachers in these groups were looking at the data. It was in specific time frame, over a decade, they said, just about, where they were looking at it and looking very specifically and an in-depth analysis of how the discussions were going. We say that this is case study and design, qualitative in approach because we're looking at script, no statistical analysis, and looking at a constructivist worldview because we see it in emerging approaches on how we're looking at student thinking through the participant views of the teachers that were involved. Ethics, not really said in this journal very often, but we are hoping that the editorial panel takes care of that. Is there bias in the articles when an author is part of the research and just not an observer? That's something we can look at. And participant confidentiality. We see only first names used in this last article, which protects the participant's confidentiality. And so that's something ethical that we have to look in journals, and we see them trying to protect that in the article that we studied in-depthly. In conclusion, we believe that this journal, The Mathematics Teacher, has a commitment to improving mathematics education. It has a commitment to collaboration and bridging that gap between academics and teachers with an increase in academic and teacher collaboration and authorship. And we believe that the research is very heavily qualitative and very specific with case study and grounded theory and design. So we believe that it's very appropriate for classroom teachers due to the specificity of what they're studying. And here are our references that we used in this presentation. Thank you.